And then the last text, which is the text, the cognitive plantation, is what I understood the final moment, or like the last moment of this formulation that relates to that that is both like the like let's say the last moment and the first moment of a different approach. And that's the transition I would like to share with you, because it's the first, it's the last moment, the moment in which I name that. So that's so okay. The system I'm getting in is the cognitive plantation. And why I'm naming it as the cognitive plantation? Because as the historical regimen of the plantation, which was based on the idea that white people could appropriate violently and kidnap violently black people from their continent to the Americas, for instance. So all the system was based in the color line, was based in a projected identity, in a mode of outer identification. What I'm saying with that? So whiteness, white colonists, they identified blackness as non as a less than human category, and they projected this category onto the people of an entire continent and the people of all the global south somehow. It was made about an outer identification. So they had a category that they have invented, and they used this category to name people they would afterward dominate and kidnap and force into labor. So that's the historical fact. But if in order for me to be in the system, I cannot but perform and represent a category that they have created to describe my existence, what's happening here? And of course, I'm not saying that the plantation, the modern plantation of enslavement, I'm not saying that it is the same thing. I'm not saying that the violence is the same. I'm just saying that one system unfolds from the other. So getting back to the Portuguese collective, when they say the productivity of blackness interests us, they're not talking about cotton picking anymore. They're not talking about coffee plantations anymore. They are talking about theories. They are talking about artworks. They are talking about ideas, concepts. They are saying that in order to save their world, they need to appropriate again blackness. Right now, not as labor force, like as classical labor force, but as an idea, as the forces that inhabit these ideas. So I don't know if you are following or if it makes sense to you, or if I'm explaining it properly. Um, I'm just saying that this text, the cognitive plantation, which is available online, and of course the text might be more detailed than my explanation here. It is available if you look the cognitive plantation Jota Mombaça on Google, you find the link for the text. Um, but this text, it basically comes from this acknowledgement that somehow the way my work or the work I was doing, and of so many people like me, and also inscribed by blackness and raciality, as non-white people were doing, somehow this work were completely informed by a system that want to buy us as blacks, want to buy us as indigenous, want to buy us as radical, as trans. You see, wants to buy us, and it's quite literal because, well, I'm a visual artist. I circulate mostly on the visual arts field, and the thing of buying, it's quite scary how it is a thing for us, because it's all about like buy, they are buying you. I remember I was in an art fair in Sydney last year, and there was this white lady who was a collector, and she saw me, and she came to me like touching and saying like, oh, if everything is on point here, the person, the hair. And I was like, shit, she's trying to buy me. She wants to buy me. And that's the complicated thing, because it's there. And our life is commodified. And our life gets again into the equation of value. That is a more theoretical aspect of this text cognitive plantation that I don't want to get in. I'm seeing that my time is already running, but I don't want super get into that, which is, but it's there in the text, and it's also in Denise Ferreira da Silva's work. The way Denise Ferreira da Silva describes the problem of value, which is related because it's related to the form modernity has created to operate with value both as an economic thing and as an ethical thing. Yeah. So a person with no value is a person that is ethically dispossessed. You can make anything with such a person, according to this thinking. So the idea of value were always related with a certain form of describing and creating hierarchies between peoples and bodies and subjects and etc. and places. So value was always there as a problem, because it was always there as a force that replicates hierarchy, that replicates the idea that there are good humans, bad humans, and etc. And we know what these ideas have created. So in this text, I also like confront the idea of value, and I ask, um, does it make sense for us to fight for being valued by this system? Does it make sense? Is that our goal? Or better say, it's like, what happens when we are valued? Our oppression stops, our oppression ends when we are valued? That was the question. If we look into the history of value, which is related to the history of slavery, the history of colonization, the value is there. Value is the tool, it's the colonial tool used to describe black people as less than human, indigenous communities as less than human, and then to dominate them. So somehow this text, it gets to a moment which is the moment of pointing a limit to the valorization of difference and saying to value difference is not the same as abolishing the regimes of oppression that continuously produce violence against certain forms of difference. Value in difference is not enough, and it's not and it's not granting a possibility to us right now. And so there's this moment in the text in which I do that. I articulate the limits of difference, and for doing that, I criticize a very well-known Brazilian philosopher, white Brazilian philosopher, called Sueli Ronick, and I criticize because her project is the project of like the valorization of difference and like bringing difference, and then difference is the tool for making the world more just, or for adjusting power relations. I'm simplifying now, so please remember that I'm simplifying. The actual discussion, there's a bit more detail and complexity, but when I get to this moment, to this critique, or to this limit of the valorization of difference, is where I get to a moment in Edouard Glissant, a beautiful book called The Poetics of Relation. So Edouard Glissant is this black Caribbean thinker who wrote several things, poetry and everything. Is a poet, and he wrote also this book called Poetics of Relation, which is a theory book I like very much. And in a certain moment of this text, Eduardo Glissant comes with the idea of opacity. So it's quite interesting because he basically he says it literally. He says the right to opacity is most important than the right to difference, because it is in opacity that difference is generated, that difference is nurtured. So what is opacity? Opacity is that which is not transparent, which cannot be seen through, which cannot be completely intelligible when translated. Transparency here is both like transparency, like a plastic bag that you can a window that you can see through, that's transparency, but it's also a form of describing that which is completely intelligible, that one can just look and understand. I don't know if that's transparency. And opacity is the opposite on that. The opaque is that which you cannot grasp completely. The opaque is that which you cannot understand completely. And what Eduardo Glissant is calling is for a form of ethical relationship that preserves the right to opacity of everyone, that preserves the right of we do not understanding each other completely in order to be together, to work together, to operate together, to have a conversation. Because Glissant is responding to the critiques that say that the idea of the right to opacity would get everything into barbarism, because people would be like completely enclosed in the opacity. But what Glissant says is that the opacity is not what prevents relation. It is the condition of relation. Because the condition of relation is that I respect what I don't understand in you. That I respect that what I cannot read or grasp in you, in your experience, in your position. So the right to opacity somehow might allow us to not have to sell our souls in a way. Why I'm saying that? Because the right to opacity is connected with, maybe it was too big like affirmation right now. But what I was saying, what I was trying to say is that all the systems that I've been describing since the beginning of this talk is somehow rooted in a desire to understand, to comprehend, and to transform blackness, transness, racial, other racial positionalities, indigenous knowledge. The art world wants to transform it in a transparent thing. They want to understand. It's quite literal. They want to understand blackness, to understand queerness, to understand transness, to understand indigenous cosmologies. They want to understand. And understanding is the form of extracting. What I'm trying to say is that maybe we should refuse the understanding. Maybe we should refuse to be understood by them, because what we want is different. I am particularly not invested in being understood and comprehended by the white audiences of European museums. That's not my goal. That's not my goal. I don't believe that white supremacists in Europe will like become less racist by understanding us. We need to displace their centrality and the centrality of their intentions. Instead of becoming understandable within the framework of their conscience, we need to refuse it somehow, and nurture our opacity, which is our capacity of being mysterious. There is a sentence of a poem by Rita Dove that I love very much. It's a poem dedicated to Billie Holiday. And in the end of this poem, Rita Dove says, if you can't be free, be a mystery. And I love to repeat that as a prayer, as a spell casting exercise. That for me is really important in my practice also. Repeating words and saying words out loud. So if you can't be free, be a mystery. If you can't be free, be a mystery. If you can't be free, be a mystery. And the white world doesn't want us to become mysterious. They don't want the art world don't wanted me to be mysterious. They wanted me to be transparent. They wanted me to reflect on my condition, on the condition I experience, and they think they understand. That's what they wanted of me. They wanted transparency. They wanted me to reproduce the terms of my identity and to talk about that all the time. They wanted me to become a specialist and the violence that destroys me, that attempts to destroy me. They wanted me to become a specialist. And somehow, in order to occupy the position that I now seem to occupy, I needed to do that. And all these texts I presented to you, and all this work I tried to share with you right now in this weird way, were me trying to become a specialist in the violence I was being subjected to in order to be accepted and to make part of the system. That's what I've been doing. And that's also the limit where I now find myself. I don't want to continue doing that. So for me, it's important to share this with you right now, and I'm already finishing. It's important to share this with you right now because it's part of the performances I'm doing in order to stop being a specialist in my oppression. I wanted to think about more things. I want to imagine otherwise. And that's where my work with science fiction gets in. And that's where my work with film, my work with drawings, that my work with abstraction gets in. I'm trying to, I don't know, I'm trying to stop doing this work that the art system wants us to make in order to do the work that nurtures me and then can nurture my communities otherwise.